And to commemorate the official visit of Prime Minister Albanese, joining with us today are two international experts from University of Queensland, Ahmad Rizky Umar. Good evening from Queensland, and from University of Padjajaran, Pak Teuku Rezasyah, with us today in the studio. Thank you so much, Pak Rezasyah, for being here in the studio of C today.
Thank you very much for taking me in.
Yes.
So Pak Reza has been joining us since the morning show today, and we do really appreciate your time and also your commitment to see today, Pak Reza. And we'd like to ask our viewers that would like to take off our mask to make our discussion, heard and followed much better by our audience.
Agree. All right, let's go ahead with our discussion now. I'd like to begin with Mas Umar. Hi, Mas Umar, you're here with us?
Yes, hello. Thank you very much for having me.
Yes, it's a great honor also for us. So, first and foremost, with the new administration, how do you project Australia and Indonesia relations under PM Albanese? We know that this is the first visit and he chooses Indonesia. How do you see this? And this is not the first time that Albanese visited Indonesia, and he comes back and making Indonesia the priority. How do you see this?
I think what Prime Minister Albanese do now in his first official visit in Indonesia is a one large improvement from the previous administration. So Albanese makes Indonesia as his first overseas trip after visiting Tokyo last week, and he brings not only his official ministers but also some important projects that would gear up Indonesian-Australian relations in the future. So I think it's a huge improvement for the relationship between two countries.
Right, Mas Umar, we know that the relationship between Indonesia and the former Prime Minister of Australia, Scott Morrison, was really good, especially between President Jokowi and Scott Morrison. But now we have Prime Minister Albanese here heading Australia's government. What do you think will be different between Albanese's and also Morrison's strategy when it comes to embracing and also engaging with Indonesia?
So the previous administration, Scott Morrison is largely driven by defense and security concerns, and it was made clear in his visit in Jokowi's visit to Australia earlier in 2020, that most of the Morrison's government approach is actually based on the security concerns. Even though he's made some important progress, like Indonesia and Australia Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement, which is something that is a milestone in the Australia-Indonesia relationship. Now, Albanese tends to have a more diplomatic engagement. He brings up a more important project and puts aside security concerns. It's not. It doesn't mean that security is not important, but Albanese wants to engage more in a diplomatic means and by bringing up non-political, non-security relationship with Indonesia. So it's a difference between Morrison and Albanese.
All right, now when we talk about AUKUS, it gained controversies across Southeast Asian countries. Perhaps, trust to the Australian as a country is a bit lessened, before that. So how do you say about this, and how does the Australians react to the pact?
So AUKUS, as I had mentioned before, is largely driven by security concerns from Australia to contain some emerging threats in the Indo-Pacific region. So basically, what Scott Morrison do with AUKUS was to develop a huge partnership with United States and the UK to boost defense partnership which relates to the nuclear-powered submarine. However, I think, and this is something that was debated in the general election campaign in Australia earlier this year, that it's not only about how to contain emerging threats in the Pacific, but also to make sure that Australia's partnership with regional partners like Indonesia, other Southeast Asian countries, and the Pacific countries is maintained. So, and this is something that Albanese brings in the current government, is to diversify Australia's partnership not only with the Western countries, which is traditionally Australian allies, but also to bring up more lively partnership with Southeast Asian and Pacific countries. So
Right.
this is something that was being debated during the general election campaign in Australia.
So ASEAN is a pivotal region for Australia, and it's not only Indonesia that has interest in the South China Sea, but also other countries as well, especially Vietnam and even the Philippines. How do you think the new administration of Albanese will engage ASEAN in general, and what interest would Albanese put in the aspired strong relationship between the country and the region of ASEAN?
So Albanese, since the federal election campaign, and now he's also reiterating during his first press conference when he was elected as the prime minister, he mentioned about the importance of Asian centrality. And today, if we take a look at the statement at the press conference, then Albanese was actually mentioning some important documents in ASEAN as an acknowledgement of Asian centrality in the Indonesian and Australian relationship. So this is the promise of Prime Minister Albanese to acknowledge the ASEAN outlook on Indo-Pacific and ASEAN centrality in gearing up the relationship between Australia and Southeast Asian countries. However, we cannot deny that Australia has a bigger concerns about China, right? And then this is something that is also becoming a huge debate in the federal election. And this is something that Albanese wants to maintain in a safe way between Southeast Asian countries and Australia in order to make sure that the region is not gearing up towards a great power rivalry. So this is something that is being debated, and this is something that Albanese wants to engage for Australian foreign and security policy.
Okay.
All right, Mas Umar, please stay there because we're going to go back to you again, and now we're going to discuss it with Pak Reza, who is also in the studio with us today. So how do you see this between Albanese and President Joko Widodo, Indonesia and Australia? He declared that he wants to strengthen the relationship with Indonesia, specifically in ASEAN, because we are probably we're the biggest and we're very vital also in the region, and also a lot of investments being talked during the meeting. How do you see this? We know that Australia has its own point about deterring China's assertiveness here in the Indo-Pacific region.
Well, the Chinese factor has been there since the middle of the Cold War. If we witness, for example, in year 1970s, there was a theory well known in Southeast Asia, introduced by the US government, called the domino theory, meaning the fall of South Vietnam will mean the fall of Southeast Asia as a set of domino. So since then, it came to the mind of the Southeast Asian security planners that the China factor is there. But during the Cold War, we were still thinking how to contain China. The idea was containment, US containment. But later on, we realized who can do containment any longer when the superpower itself, in this case the US, is experiencing a lowering level of global capabilities. So countries in Southeast Asia are beginning to think not talking about containment any longer, but engagement. Because we cannot avoid the fact that China is there. China is flexing its muscles. China has more than 170 global strategic partnership with countries all over the world, you name it. I do not know the full name.
Yeah.
And then I also do not know the contents of such agreements. It's confidential. So this is China. And in this case, we also witness that Australia always find Indonesia is a strategic partner. Yeah. For example, since 1974, within the 8 years of the establishment of ASEAN, Australia was the first country to become the dialogue partner of ASEAN. At the time, we were ASEAN 5, Indonesia, Malaysia, Singapore, Thailand, and the Philippines. Through regular consultation, Australia knew exactly what ASEAN needs. Yeah. In multiple areas, let's say trade, education, investment, and socio-cultural cooperation. Yeah. Australia has had sufficient stock of information on ASEAN countries as a whole and also at the individual level. Now back to China, we cannot challenge China. We cannot. We do not have enough amalgamation of power to do that. So what we need to do is to maintain cohesiveness inside ASEAN. China has 1.3 billion people. ASEAN has altogether 650 to 700 million people.
So half of it.
Half of it. And then we try to produce a cohesive position with regard to China, especially when it comes to South China Sea issue.
Right.
Yeah, even though the ASEAN has been divided. There are some countries like Malaysia, Philippines, Vietnam, and Brunei, they are claimants. Indonesia are non-claimants.
But Natuna is being disputed as well.
That could be the danger.
Right.
So we do not know exactly China's strategic plan. What we are witnessing at the moment,
right.
And we are at the same language with Australia. We are also at the similar psychological, at the mental map with Australia, that Chinese behavior needs to be corrected.
Right, but this is really interesting because Indonesia sits in the middle of these two superpowers. AUKUS, Australia, UK, and also America, and also China. And the relationship between Indonesia and China versus Indonesia with Australia is similarly love and hate affairs, right? So as a country that sits in the middle of it, representing and also, we are the leader of ASEAN as well, how does Indonesia need to react to the assertiveness of China and the growing military capability of Australia with regards with AUKUS?
So this is the beauty of the non-aligned movement. Yeah? We never say we are leaning to Washington D.C. or leaning to Moscow or leaning to Beijing or leaning to Canberra. We never declare this. But in the heart this is the strength of the Indonesian non-aligned movement. We adhere to the legal instruments of the world. Let's say United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea. We reject the use of force in this Southeast Asia region. And since the beginning, we have introduced ideas such as zone of peace, freedom, and neutrality. And also we have also introduced the idea of Southeast Asian nuclear weapon-free zone. We also introduced ideas of Treaty of Amity and Cooperation. We have introduced ideas of what we call territorial integrity and sovereignty and recognition of sovereignty. So these are the barriers for Indonesia to prevent itself being involved, and also to notify others that this is the rule of the game in Southeast Asia. In this case, we know our limit. So there are always rooms for defense and security cooperation, and as long it is not considered as challenging one disputed party.
Okay.
So this is a matter of communication. So this is legal because with the US we have strategic partnership. With Australia we have an agreement called the Lombok Treaty. And with New Zealand we have also a regular consultation. And we have so many deep cooperation with Australia, such as in the Indonesia-Australia closer economic partnership.
So Indonesia has to dance on the surface of this rivalry between the two superpowers.
Yes.
Okay. Now, when we talk about Albanese, we know that after 9 years, finally, Prime Minister of Australia is elected, and he's from the Labour Party. Now, visit the intensifies of the regional diplomatic offensive. The new Labour government is spearheaded. Now, since winning the federal election in 21st of May, how do you see this?
Well, in Australia, there is a term here called bipartisanship. So in this case, when a new government coming, they will not wipe out the previous achievements, no. They respect the achievements, but they modify it in such a way which is in line with the labor's platform. So earlier on, our speaker mentioned that we had a good relation with Morrison, correct? And it doesn't mean that Albanese will forget that. Albanese will utilize achievements, bilateral achievements, regional achievements, also global achievements already established by the two governments. And in this case, luckily, we are dealing with a country which make policies based on research. So Australian government has a capacity to amalgamate the best thinking coming from technical ministries, and then from universities in South Australia, research institution in South Australia, and also we call it business associations.
Right.
So regularly we have contact, we have communication at the bilateral levels. That's the job of our ambassador over there, and also the job of Australian ambassador over here. And we have a strong multi-layered kind of cooperation.
Right.
For example, at the government level, okay, we have a Lombok Treaty. We have a 2+2 meeting between the two. Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Ministry of Defense, over here from Indonesia, over there from Australia. But we also have a business association called AIBC, Australia-Indonesia Business Council over there, and Indonesia-Australia Business Council over here.
So actually the cooperation between Indonesia and Australia is really, really deep in many sectors and also field. But talking about relationship between Indonesia and Australia, this will bring me to, again, to Mas Umar, living in Queensland. As an Indonesian living and working in Australia, Mas Umar, especially as an academic, why do you think the interest of learning Indonesian language, Bahasa Indonesia, is on decline in Australia?
So there are multiple explanations on that, but we know since 2013, when Prime Minister Tony Abbott came to power, so there are some restructurizations of the Australian government funding in terms of research, in terms of higher education, and also in terms of language skills and training. And then we know that since Tony Abbott in 2013, there are some cuts in foreign aid, including to Indonesia, as well as some relocations of the budget in maintaining the language education in Australia. So this is some concerns of Australian academics who are working in Indonesian studies, that in the previous government, especially since 2013, there are declining support. And then there is also a second reason, because of the changing demography in Australian citizens as well. Because now Australian citizens tend to learn language that will provide them with ability to work after they graduate from university. And this is something that can be a challenge when, for example, less Australian graduates are finding work in Indonesia. So that's why I think the bilateral relationship should also encompass the people-to-people partnership, not only in terms of supporting language, but also supporting closer contacts between Australians and Indonesians. So I think that's one reason why there is a decline in language.
I'd like
training.
to ask Pak Reza's perspective on this. Do you think that Australia needs a reform on its language teaching, that they need to put more Indonesia language emphasis to children, Australian children?
We cannot force this, because Australian foreign policy making is based on research. They will see, for example, the strategic role of Bahasa Indonesia in the future. They will see the strategic role of Bahasa Indonesia in its mother country. So in this case, I witnessed the same problem faced by Indo Study in Holland. In Leiden University, they have an institution called KITLV, Koninklijk Instituut voor Taal, Land en Volkenkunde. I think the level of the Indonesian teaching is lowering. But if we go to Australia, to universities in Australia, for example, if I visited Australian National University, they have an excellent Center of Indonesian Studies. They have an excellent School of Indonesian Language. If we go to Canberra, Australian National University, then if we go to Western Australia, in this case, among others, Murdoch University, they have also capacity not only to learn the language, but also learn the philosophy Indonesia, let's say the music. And they have a 1-year training for students inside Indonesia under the name of Acicis. Yeah.
Right.
I recall, even they have professor for this. For example, in Australia, I used to know Professor David Hill. He's in charge with this. And if we go to Australian University, I used to meet Professor Harold Crouch, also
You know all
dealing
the
with
professors.
this. So they are dealing. So the way the way they analyze Indonesia is not
Quite deep.
not only talking at the language level, but psychological level,
Philosophy.
philosophical level, and also historical level.
Right.
So Prime Minister Albanese today was correct that we are not okay. Language is very important, but that apart from language, history is important, business is important. So in this case, it is time for Indonesia to think, if we put ourselves in the Australian shoes, what to do. Well, this is the time for Indonesia to send their senior lecturers to work in Australia under special visa, for example, to help the Australian government establish a Center of Indonesian Studies, Center of Indonesian Language Studies. Let them.
And we've got the professor already in front of us.
Yes, one of them is here.
If Pak Reza would like to.
He
go
was
to
also in
to set
Australia
up
for
that.
quite some time, right? In Murdoch University. So it's probably your second home there in Australia.
Well, there is always a place for me. I used to stay in Australia for 5 years. So I'm quite familiar with the Australian environment, Australian culture, and I witnessed how they respected Indonesian culture. And I meet Australians capable speaking in Bahasa Indonesia at the native speaker level.
Wow.
All right.
Wow.
Because actually they stayed in Yogyakarta for some time.
Yeah.
And if you go to Murdoch University, you can still find professors knowing Bahasa Indonesia, but also Indonesian Silat,
Oh, wow.
martial
right,
art.
right.
martial art.
That's amazing.
Yes.
All right. So would like to thank Mas Umar from Queensland University. Thank you so much for speaking with us.
Thank you very
It's a
much.
very lovely time. And also, Pak Reza, you should have stayed until the end of the show because we're going to taste Vegemite and Long Black.
I'll join you.
Coffee.
I'll join you, Vegemite. I miss Vegemite.
Pak
Thank you
Reza,
so much.
Thank you very
We
much.
do
And
appreciate
hopefully that our relationship with Australia will be stronger than
Yeah.
ever, and it will be based on mutual respect.
Thank you.